see the flames. It was about 75 feet from my home. It was a terrifying sight. It was awful.
It's just one of those things that struck you dumb. My mother was saying, I can't see out the windows anymore because there's so much smoke.
The whole fire is coming down! Will you get on in?
Sunday, October 20th, 1991 in Oakland, California. One of the most destructive urban fires in American history breaks out in the densely populated hills on the city's north side.
I'm Renee Kemp. We interrupt our regularly scheduled program for this news bulletin. A major brush fire has erupted in the Oakland Hills.
Oakland homeowner Luigi Bonaccini gets his first glimpse of the fire as he's driving home across the Oakland Bay Bridge.
I had never seen the scope of a fire that large. You could see the flames all the way from the bottom deck of the Bay Bridge. They were 50, 100, 200 feet up in the air.
As Luigi gets closer to his neighborhood in the Oakland Hills, he realizes that the fire is putting his wife and two small children, one of them an infant, in mortal danger.
20% of the hillside from where I knew that my house was located. And I could tell by some landmarks that I was right in it.
Cap 445 to all 45 units, be advised, we have no engines left. There is nothing from 85 or 91.
We had blocks of homes burning on both sides of the streets.
On the day of the fire, James Williams is a rookie firefighter with the Oakland Fire Department.
We were coming off of multiple years of drought. There had not been much precipitation. This particular day, the winds were gusting at extreme speeds.
The blaze breaks out near the top of Temescal Canyon around 11 a.m. as fire crews contend with embers from a brush fire they'd fought the day before.
The winds really whipped up, and with that, embers started to fly about throughout the hill areas, and that's really where the origin of the fire started.
Firefighters are suddenly facing their worst enemy, the notorious Diablo winds that blow hot and dry from the interior valleys east of Oakland. The Diablos pick up embers from the top of the canyon and drop them into the neighborhoods below, creating dozens of new blazes, known as spot fires.
In some cases, it moved as far as 1,000 yards in 15 seconds.
It burned out neighborhoods like Claremont Hills. The destruction is virtually complete.
We started meeting neighbors at the barricades. Basically, what we discovered was that most of the people had kind of run for their lives.
Teresa and Peter Scott hurry back from an out-of-town trip, only to hear that their home almost certainly is burned to the ground. But the most terrifying news is that no one knows what's happened to Peter's 85-year-old invalid mother, who lives with them full-time. Her caretaker was away at church when the neighborhood was evacuated.
We went to a number of hospitals and rest homes and things like that. And finally, after we had exhausted all that we could think of in those terms, we actually went to the morgue.
None of the local evacuation centers has any record of the woman Peter's family affectionately calls Grandy. By the time Luigi Bonaccini arrives at the base of his Rock Ridge neighborhood, police and fire personnel have set up barricades and are refusing to let residents through.
And I'm thinking to myself, how can I possibly get into my home? And I remembered that there was a little road in the back, and I took a shot that there wouldn't be any personnel there. And indeed, there wasn't. So I was able to drive through the back road, and I was able to proceed through the area, and I got to our house.
He races into the house. He is relieved to find that his wife and children have fled to safety. But in the few minutes it takes him to make sure, the hillside behind the house starts to burn.
It was about 75 feet from my home. It was a terrifying sight. It was awful.
Now he faces a terrible dilemma: flee for his life or risk death by trying to save his dream home.
I grabbed my hose, my garden hose, I turned it on, prayed that I had water. I did. I had sufficient pressure, and I started to spray the sides of my home. At that point, the fire was already, it was already hot enough in my backyard, and really against my house, that the water started sizzling against the side of the house. That's how close I was coming.
The danger he faces now is being caught in one of the numerous firestorms that are erupting across the hills.
There really is a thing called a firestorm. That occurs as a result of the winds that are created by the fire itself.
The most intense fires pull in vast amounts of air from the surrounding area and send it skyward in strong updrafts. This creates ground-level wind turbulence that cause flames to suddenly move outward from the base of the fire.
It was almost unbearable. So I had to take the garden hose and I would just turn it on my head and just give myself a shower every 90 seconds or so. It's the only way I could tolerate it.
2 hours into the fire, it has jumped 2 major freeways and is rapidly moving south in the direction of downtown Oakland. Firefighters are powerless to stop the devastation.
Well, we were out of resources the first 45 minutes to hour of the incident. There were over 50 fires burning at one time. When you look at the number of homes that were consumed, the Hiller Highlands community had somewhere probably between 300 and 500 homes. The fire moved through there, consuming the home's vegetation in a matter of 16 minutes.
By early evening, the winds subside and fire crews start to prevail.
After the winds died down, it allowed us to get the upper hand, to get resources in place to get the fire fully contained and then ultimately under control.
The next morning, Peter and Teresa Scott and their 2 daughters are frantic for answers about Peter's missing mother. They persuade an officer at one of the barricades to take them up the hill to their home.
I couldn't even recognize where our house had been initially. I couldn't recognize the corner we lived on because it was like somebody had dropped a bomb. It was a complete gray ash for as far as you could see.
I went to where her bedroom used to be, and then I began looking for any indication of her remains.
But it's 13-year-old Ginny searching through the ashes at the opposite end of the site who finally solves the mystery.
Ginny turned around and said, "Mom," and I said, "What?" And she said, "Look," and she pointed, and I went, "Oh my God." There were no bones, it was just ash. It was just a silhouette in ash.
We could see her remains, see that it was her. And when I reached down to try to pick up a bone, it was just powder. It was just one of those things that struck you dumb.
The Scotts soon learned that the police did go back to the house just before it burned, but the doors were locked. If Grandy heard them calling out to her, she was unable to respond before the fire drove them away.